let's talk about the creative INFP. Now, I'm sure all INFPs are like, well, I'm creative. What do you mean creative subtype?
Yeah. I think this is a little bit more in people's minds when they think about INFPs as a prototype, is the creative subtype.
Is this that image of the INFP holding the balloon that just walks off the cliff, not realize, like they're kind of like just daydreaming and wandering and a little unaware of their circumstances or surroundings?
Yeah, I think they were holding, was it a balloon or a flower, and they're about to walk off a cliff
Something
into like a whole sort of pit of rabid dogs.
Yeah.
And is like another romantic enters the world.
Yeah.
It's very INFP. But I think it is more the sort of the creative, curious dreamer style of the INFP. So these INFPs are playful, right? Usually delightfully playful. They bring curiosity, fun, a bubbly imagination. They trust the gift of magic. They seem a little bit more extroverted maybe than some of the other subtypes. And they have more of a get things going feel about them. They are very good at brainstorming. They have a very strong, what's called a starburst pattern in EEG machines. And so that means that their brains light up when they do things like, brainstorm with another person, and they make all those connections in their minds very quickly. They have excellent capacities to think outside the box more than maybe the dominant INFP would. And they also have a harder time focusing, right? Unsurprisingly. They might have jumped around from career to career. They have a really hard time focusing on one thing and just doing one thing for a long time. But because of that, then they're suited to certain kind of work more than others. You know, they might be really suited to travel, right? The arts, working with small groups all over the place. And because they are a creative subtype and because they have all of this imagination and outside the box thinking, they're the ones who tend to legitimately go into the arts, right? Filmmaking, things like the visual arts. And also, philosophy might be interesting, or, something in journalism might be interesting. Something that allows them to stay open-ended and not have to make those definitive choices like the dominant subtype does.
Yeah. So mistypes as well. My guess is that because they're so artistic, maybe they would mistype as, I don't know, maybe the intuition is really high, right? So they might mistype as a different... I don't know. Do you think mistype's the thing with this creative, or is this pretty much no, we know they're an INFP?
I think that if a mistype is going to happen, it's probably a confusion around whether or not they're an ENFP or an INFP.
Yeah.
They might have like a bit of more of an extroverted feel about them. And so they might mistype as extroverts. But I think we make a lot of space in the type world, right? In the type community for this style of INFP.
Yeah.
They're also very good with humor, right?
Okay.
They are good with abstract language and different concepts. They make decent speakers, right? So they could do something in public speaking. They tend to lack what's called a halo effect in EEG machines, which are the part of us that understands sort of practical application.
Yeah.
Like that, when we build a lot of really practical skills, we tend to have a good halo, either social skills or administrative practical skills. And when we lack that halo, it means that we have a hard time having the rubber hit the road. And so they do tend to lack that halo effect, but more about administratively practical things than social things. And, it's sometimes hard to do things that seem like basic requirements, right?
Yeah.
They might have a little bit of self-consciousness around not being able to, pay their taxes or whatever, or do things that other people seem to do so effortlessly. But that said, if they can allow themselves to flow through life, right, as opposed to having to do like everything that everybody else does, they are really good at exploring the human condition, right? That's really what they excel at, is watching themselves have a life, watching themselves explore what it means to be human. And they have a high value for freedom. They love, stories. Yeah. And so there's a couple different types of career paths that can really suit them. We've already mentioned filmmaking, but I suspect there's quite a few human interest filmmakers specifically that are creative INFP subtypes.
Yeah.
Again, we mentioned journalism and the visual arts, but travel blogging and writing in that frame. They could be something that or a person that goes into creative writing. And counseling and therapy still is right up the alley for this kind of subtype because they are so into the human condition.
So I'm just looking at some of those characteristics of the creative styled INFP versus the dominant styled. And I look at the dominant and I'm like, okay, this INFP probably needs some type of leadership role, something maybe they started, maybe some executive career path, some progression to take on more and more responsibility because they have that desire to lead and help influence and direct people toward a goal. I don't think that's for the creative subtype as much. They might want to be a thought leader or an emotional leader, but I don't think managing people is necessarily going to be not only in their wheelhouse, but their desire. Like,
it's unlikely that they're going to have a single-minded crusade for an extended period of time. It's more like they're probably going to have a lot of little crusades, like little things that they enjoy. And the dominant subtype has to make some bargains, right? Mm-hmm. They have to decide that they're not going to, have as wide a range of imaginative, free-flowing experiences in order to make something happen that's truly important to them. Whereas this INFP doesn't really make that bargain. They want that freedom. They want to have the capacity to explore all those things.
That freedom can be tough, though, because, and I've got 2 words here I wrote down. I wrote subsidized or platformed. So for the creative INFP, if you're listening right now, one of the things you could be thinking about is, okay, if I want to be creative and I don't want to have to go build the structure and all the infrastructure and all the things to support that, I need to find someone that can be my patron. Like, literally, I know that's an online platform, but like, go ahead and subsidize me, help fund what I do creatively, whether they buy my art or help support me in some way. Or what's great about the modern world is we have all these platforms that allow creative subtypes to still put their stuff out there, like Etsy or Uber or YouTube, or pick the platform of your choice, which creates a speed of trust between people so you can buy and sell products and services or put your content out there, make ad revenue or whatever. Like, you might be able to find a career path that's a little bit unique to you as an INFP now because of technology, because of all the infrastructure and the platforms that exist. I think that's available to you. So if you're dominant, if you're resonating with a dominant, you might want to pursue avenues of leadership, executive career stuff, but this creative platforms, I think, are your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Daria mentions that they really benefit from having a person that's a stabilizing force in their life. Yeah. So there's partnership, opportunities as well. If somebody can help be that stabilizing force, then, that could be the quote unquote platform. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. And then he also mentions that when push comes to shove, this INFP can get things done. Of course. They're not hopeless, obviously, right? They're going to be able to get things done. But he says, as long as goals, values, and the environment all gel. So that's also important. When you're choosing your career, know that it's going to have to be something that inspires you to want to buckle down. Yeah. Right? All those things are going to have to be in alignment in order to push through those moments where, like, I really don't want to do this. But you can. It's just you have to make sure that you've got those ducks in a row.
So let's talk a little bit deeper for somebody that's following along, a little bit more advanced material, talking about the 2 cognitive functions, dominant driver, co-pilot or auxiliary, introverted feeling authenticity driver, and the co-pilot is exploration or extroverted intuition. What's the attunement of these? If the dominant, both of them are analytically focused, what about the creative subtype?
So with the creative subtype, it's the perceiving function that's analytic in this case. Or not in this case, in all cases for creative subtypes. But in this case, as you mentioned, it would be extroverted intuition or exploration. So that would be the analytic bent. That's the one that wants, it doesn't want to have to not go pursue whatever it's interested in, right? It wants to be able to pursue whatever is exciting and interesting in the moment. But it's the judging function, in this case, introverted feeling or authenticity, that has the holistic bent. So there's a lot less insistence on that crusade. It's less single-minded. It's way more open-framed. It's a little bit more diffused. It's not as married to making sure that its ideals are represented in the world. And because of that, that's what gives this subtype a more relaxed feel around that.
One way I like to think about it sometimes is how compromising is this function in your life? If it's not very compromising and it's very focused, it's probably an analytic function. If it's, I'll work with you, I'll compromise, I'll bend a little bit and meet you where you're at, it's probably more holistic in its expression. Right. So what you're talking about is an INFP who doesn't compromise on their imagination, their intuition, what they're doing. They're like focused on it. It's theirs. Get on the bus or not. but I'm open to the judgments of things. Let's work together to find the best way through and how we decide what to do.
Yeah, it's less asserting how I think the world should be constructed and trying to craft it out of that image. And it's a little bit more about the introspection of the human experience. It's a little less insistent on ideals and more open to, well, why are these ideals the way they are? And let's just kind of be open with that. And so it's, it tends to be a little bit more meet you in the middle.